So hello everybody. We're going to have three 8-minute talks in this FQS session on food quality schemes. So I'm just going to start and give you a very brief summary of the findings we had through the Strength2Food projects on the economic, social, and environmental performance of certified food. What was known before Strength2Food on these aspects was different between geographical indications and organic products. In the literature, studies on geographical indication before Strength2Food had mostly focused on the economic performance of these schemes, as well as many qualitative assessments of their governance. Regarding organic products, there had been more attention, of course, on their environmental performance, but little attention to social performance except employment. And on the existing assessments on environmental performance through life cycle assessments, there have been a very important problem that there was a large heterogeneity in methods and often small samples. So for all certifications, there are three main issues that we try to overcome in Strength2Food. First, the issue of small sample sizes. Second, the focus on farm. We move to the entire value chain in Strength2Food. And third, the problem that there was little to no joint evaluation of the three sustainability pillars, so economy, environment, and social. Our findings are summarized in two ways. The first one is a book which for each product has a book chapter including a description of the product, its value chain and its governance, a tabular summary of the technical specifications of the products, and an assessment of its sustainability performance and its interpretation. So why, for example, a given product has a lower or higher carbon footprint or a lower or higher employment, for example. Then we try to summarize this in a special issue in the Journal for Agricultural and Food Industrial Organizations. Our findings there, you can see summarized in this slide. In blue, you have the economic performance at the bottom. In green, you have the environmental performance, and in red, you have the social performance. The bar indicates the median performance of the certified food against their reference value. So if the bar is close to zero, it means that there is little performance difference in performance. If the bar is to the right, then it means that the certified food are on average performing better, and the reverse is true if the bar is to the left. So what you can see overall is that on economy, blue, certified food overwhelmingly perform better. They manage to capture a higher price. They have a larger operating margin, and they also provide more economic value to their communities, so the local multiplier. The only downside is the exports. As Matt mentioned, though, on the environment, the performance of certified food tend to be not so different than their conventional alternatives, except for food miles, so the cumulative distance, and blue water, so a better performance of certified food, especially on employment, bargaining power distribution, and to a lower extent, the renewal of generations in farms. But what you can see as well is the large heterogeneity in performance difference, which means that there is a room for improvement and cross-fertilization between products and value chains. And also, because of data shortages in some cases, some indicators can more often be estimated than others. We also had a look at the trade-off and synergies between these performances. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but what we see is that high margins are quite logically associated with a younger and more educated workforce. Of course, if you can capture a higher margin, then you are attractive to newcomers. Um, um, and operating margin are also positively correlated with most performance aspects. If you have a higher margin, then it allows you to pay probably more attention to both environmental and social aspects. Young workers and entrepreneurs are associated with more evenly distributed bargaining power, and trivially, food moist performance is deteriorating with increasing exports. Of course, if you export a lot, then the distance that your products travel increases a lot. So all the tools we've developed to estimate these performance indicators are now accessible on an open database that you can download. So you can download both the method, the Excel tool to collect data and to estimate the indicators, as well as the full data set of the indicators we have calculated that you can now use as a reference. And here are the reference I've mentioned, and that I encourage you to look into if you want more details. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. I will go for a second presentation of this session. And this presentation will concern on the relationship of public good and GI, and in the framework of the food quality scheme. So the starting point is the concept of sustainability. Science sustainability is based on the concept of using a three pillar: economic, social, and environmental dimension. But these dimensions are hidden in some way and spread in a lot of goals that are defined in the Sustainable Development Goals by UN. Just to show this, that sustainability and agriculture and food production is touch a lot of elements that are important for our society. So sustainability dimension touch a lot of elements, but where we have sustainability and where we have to impact on sustainability. In the Strength2Food project, we have assessed a theoretical framework where, hopefully we have improved a theoretical framework even previously set by FAO, where we use the concept of a local agri-food system, where we combine the concept of the value chain with the concept of a territory. And we can define an area of a production and consumption. This because in the geographical indication, the name of the area of production actually matter. Is something that is not just for marketing, but there is a real impact on the local product, of the quality of the product and local consumption and economic activities. So we can see that we can have a different level of impact on sustainability if the production refers to local market, domestic market, or global market, where the difference by domestic and global market is given by the trade rule or the rule of trade given by WTO, etc. So another point is which are the element for managing sustainable food quality schemes in by geographical indication. So we say that we have the different type of food that are given are linked to sustainability and that can be private good, public good, and then we have mixed good. And so as we saw previously by Valentin, in our research activity, we was looking exactly to these three dimensions. But then these three dimensions are generating and managing by public goods using a general legal framework given by EU or national law. Then we have a governance structure that are GI groups that actually manage a code of practice that is active on territorial area. So what are the implications of sustainability? We can assess sustainability in private and public and mixed good using a quantitative indicator or just observing what are the experience and good practice that producer has developed in their territory. So the methodological approach that we set in our work was to, first of all, understand the type of and characteristic of public goods generating by the production system, understand the determinants of the public goods generation, how to manage and enhance public good over time, the stakeholder, and then the stakeholder commitment and the feasibility of good practice that generate public good. That the first three elements is something that we have observed in our guide, and so we define the public good in three main categories: cultural heritage preservation, socioeconomic, and use of natural resources. Each of them, of course, has determinants that give us the indication of which are the good practice. All of these are in our strategic guide, and so it's really learning from practice, and there is a comparative analysis of sustainability among food quality case study, and with the description of these, some of them good practice and a key message. In totally, we start with 19 case GI case history. We have divided by 6 product category. Then we have 3 macro category of public good, and in total we can say that we have 665 good practice referring to different type of public good. All of these are available and using it and downloaded and by a database that is available on this website. Concluding, GI products generate a public good at the last level, and that is why they are a food quality scheme, and good practice of a GI group can represent example for other GI producers to improve the sustainability of their production system in the interest of local community and consumer. Thank you very much. I'm waiting for your answer after this session. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to follow. My name is Monika Rachtmann, and there was a group of researchers in Strength2Food dealing with consumer studies. This group was from 7 countries, and we did a number of different investigations. We used ethnographic work. We had experimental designs where we went into virtual supermarkets and examined different interventions. And we had a number of surveys covering a total of 11,000 respondents. And I would like to focus on the latter in the following. So one of the issues which is important when we are talking about food quality schemes and food quality logos is really to look at label recognition, use, and perception. Because only if consumers recognize the label and trust a label, really the positive implications of food quality scheme really can come into effect. And so this was an aspect we looked at, and we looked at this with respect to 4 EU quality schemes, which you already have been introduced to, the PDO, PGI, TSG, and organic. But we also looked at this with respect to 14 national and regional labels from 7 different countries: France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, UK, Norway, and Serbia. And for each of these countries, we looked at 2 different labels. So let me move to recognition and say a little bit what we did find. So we asked consumers, do you recognize this label? And they had the possibility to answer yes and no. And we found quite different results between national labels and EU quality labels. So if we look at national labels on average, and let me stress, this refers to 14 different labels out of 7 different countries. On average, about 64% of our respondents recognized those national labels. You can see that recognition was much lower with respect to EU labels, ranging from 34% for the EU organic label to 18% for the TSG label. However, this is a very aggregate picture, and we certainly went into much more detail to look at this. And here's just an aggregate for some of, again, for the national labels altogether, and then for some of these for the EU labels. And what you can very nicely see is that if we just look at the PGI label, in Italy, we have about 70% of respondents recognize this label, while this share is in Norway with only 7%, much lower. So on average, EU labels are recognized to a lesser extent, but there's quite a bit of variation between the different countries. Variation also exists between national labels, as you can see. For example, the correspondence to the PGI in Norway is recognized to a very low extent, by almost everybody in Germany recognized the German organic label. Why is it important to look at recognition of labels? A second question we asked: to what extent do you take the label into account when you're doing your grocery shopping? And we looked at those who said at least that they sometimes take it into account. And what we did find is that about 70% of those who recognize a label take it at least sometimes into account. And this is independent which label we are looking at, whether we are looking at the EU labels or whether we are looking at the national labels. So recognition is a very important step on the way to the use of labels. Let us move from label recognition and use to label perception. And this is something we looked in detail at with questions such as: the label is easy to understand, the label is trustworthy, the label helps me to make an informed choice. And what you can see is that national labels are perceived much, that national labels have a much higher agreement that these statements are in fact true. So about 67% of our respondents said that the label is easy to understand, holds for the different national labels. About 50, the number is about 50, what's the net agreement to the label is trustworthy. And we do see that the values are much lower with respect to the EU quality food schemes. And what might be a bit worrying is that it's even going in the negative area for the EU organic label. Maybe quite understandable. If you look at the label, it's not very much self-explanatory. So we might ask the question, is label modification warranted? And this is, for example, one aspect where we did a little experiment in our consumer studies, where we did look at the traditional EU organic label, but we also looked at modifications of the EU organic label, and we modified the label according to what is usually associated with organic, so bio or eco. And as you see, what you already saw kind of on the previous slide, very low agreement to the statements for the traditional organic label, but this very, very slight modification leads to much, much higher values to the net agreement regarding those statements. So what can we say for policy implications if we think about these labels? We need well-designed communication campaigns to raise consumer awareness of EU food quality labels. And this is not only a conclusion which we draw from our surveys, but this is something which we also draw from our ethnographic studies. We, particular for labels such as the EU organic label, which is far from self-explanatory, a modification should be considered. And this is something which could increase consumer understanding and trust in the label and support that the label serves its function, like helping to make an informed choice. So this is just a very small fraction of the studies which have been conducted in the framework of Strength2Food on consumers, but some results which are also mirrored in the other studies we conducted. So thank you very much, and your questions are welcomed. Yeah, I think the first question refers to what I just presented. And the different recognition of the labels in the different countries certainly has also something to do with the tradition in those countries with respect to labels. For example, in Italy, there's a much higher tradition to have these PGI, PDO. You have much more products which carry those kind of labels than you have in some other countries, like, for example, Norway and Germany, and that does play a role. It also certainly, the different recognition of labels has a lot to do also with communication strategies. For example, if I take the case of Germany, the German organic label has received, when it was implemented, quite a bit of advertisement, let me say government-financed advertisement for this label. This is not the case with respect to the EU organic label, and that leads to the fact that in Germany, almost everybody knows the German organic label, but they do not know only a much smaller share knows the EU organic label. So maybe that are some of the aspects which can explain and which also lead us to some of the conclusion we are drawing.
I think I answered the other question, which was quite factual. So maybe while we are waiting for other questions, may I ask you one question, Monica?
Yes, please.
What you showed, that by just adding an eco or bio in the European organic label dramatically increases recognition is very striking. So I mean, one would think that when you start designing a label, you test it with consumers. Isn't this common practice?
It should be common practice, but I doubt that it has been done really with respect to the EU labels, because at least from our studies, we do have the feeling that there's improvement for food quality scheme labels, which we investigated, yes. But indeed, one would assume that this would be a good thing to do, to see whether consumers understand. And I mean, if you look at the leaf, many people really associate something that it has something to do with maybe green, so natural, ecological, but that its organic production is not necessarily always associated with it. That's what we find from group discussions, is what we do find from some of the ethnographic studies, and that's definitely something which seems to speak out of our survey results. There are questions in the okay, let me go through it. Do you consider the percentage you found regarding
Yeah.
A good, or what would be a good? Okay, whether that's all. I mean, do we consider recognition to be a good indicator? What we do find is obviously that the recognition. I mean, let us start at an early stage. What is function of labels? We do assume that there's some kind of information asymmetry between producers and consumers, and labels serve have the function really to inform consumers so that they can make decisions according to their preferences. When labels are not even recognized, I mean, that function cannot be served, right? And even if they are recognized and they are not trusted, or people don't really know what they are standing for, I would also say that this function cannot be served. So we do think that looking at the perception and also looking at the recognition and also looking at the perception of labels is very important to get a feeling to what extent those food quality schemes really serve their purpose for which they have been introduced. So that I hope answers this. Do you think?
Maybe while you read it, there is a question on the fact that PDO or PGI symbols are in use, I assume, in Italy. I think, I mean, there are mandatory to be used in all member states, I think, since something like 2013. Maybe, Filippo, you recall that? For sure, they are present on all GI, PDO and PGI food in France.
Yes, if they are PDO, PGI, they must use the European logo and the European symbol. I have a very short question for Monica regarding to the organic. That the organic logo is a quality sign. But actually is not managed by association or eventually is managed by single company. So do you think that this make effect on the recognition of organic logo for the consumer, because there is a kind of a government action who doesn't promote the organic symbol associated with a given company or with given type of production?
I mean, we do have the rule that single companies, and that's really prevalent in many countries, and also in the ethnographic studies we did find that, or the colleagues working on that did find this, that very often this retail organic logos were known better than the official, like the German, or I mean the German was known very well, but the EU organic logo. But we do need to be aware that the EU organic logo needs to be on the product in addition. So I mean, if a product is sold as organic, it needs to have the EU organic logo on it. There can be an additional logo, like for example in Germany there can be, and many companies decide for that because the German organic logo is known much more. So it is in addition on the package. And in addition, we also have instead of the German, we have the retail organic logos on the package. But the security that the standards are kept is given by the fact that the EU organic logo has to be on the package. So I would not see if I did understand the question right, I would not see the problem that there is no third-party certification or no kind of control, because you do have that.
So I just try to answer the first question that by Kenya. So is I mean, I don't think it's an experiment for the producer science. Is something that should come from the tradition, so should be eradicated in the art of production for at least 25 years or more. So it's not really an experiment, but certainly it's difficult to understand that the feature of this product and the added value to consumers that are far from the area where are originated. And so this need investment in the communication from the association, but then this communication is expensive and can be reached only if a producer commit themselves and invest in this communication. That actually is the main problem, that are usually small medium enterprise, and they don't want or they have enough economic resource to do this.
And maybe if I may add, we did not find that it did not play a role. I mean, there are countries where the PGI and PDO are well recognized and are well evaluated, and also that there is additional willingness to pay for that. But certainly also this willingness to pay is somewhat linked to, I mean, when in a country it is not known and it is not valued in the sense that one perceives it as trustworthy, then also people are not willing to pay so much for that. Just an example, we had a discrete choice experiment with respect to apples in Germany in the framework of our consumer studies. And what we did find in this respect is that consumers valued and were willing to pay much more for the German organic label compared to the EU organic label. Just it's understandable if you perceive it as better, then you might have a higher willingness to pay. And just be clear, behind those two labels, we have exactly the same standards. So from an objective point of view, there would be no reason. But if consumers don't know that, then this is an issue.